That guy right there? That's Nico. Wait, no, hold on. No. Okay, no, yeah, that is Nico. Now, he may not know it yet, but one day he's going to make music that will be heard by millions of people around the world. But it won't be played off of any radio. This is the story of a dude, a band, and an internet sensation. This is the story of Trocadero. It began in the summer of 1997, the summer Nico decided to start a band. He had a decent idea of what it should sound like, but he'd never really written lyrics before. And he couldn't really play guitar. And he couldn't really sing, but hey, who needs any of that stuff to start a band, right? Throughout college, Nico had played upright bass. He favored instruments with a lower range, and traditional guitars just sounded too high. This led Nico to purchase a 1956 Danelectro baritone guitar from a collector in California. There were no reissues back then, and the collector actually tried to talk him out of it. "Are you sure you want to buy this guitar? It needs a fret job, one of the pickups has a hole the size of a dime, it has extensive front and back wear, and I think it was lit on fire at some point." Nico's answer? Yes, I'm sure. With the guitar purchased, next on the list was a drummer. Nico picked up the phone and called his college buddy Brandon. The two had played together in a jazz quintet in college, and Brandon was now attending med school in Boston. Fortunately, this didn't stop him from joining the band. Now they needed a keyboard, the Moog Opus 3 to be precise. After purchasing it for a song from a small music store in New Hampshire, Nico had to face facts. He had no idea how to play keyboards, and this one looked more like a World War II U-boat console than a synthesizer. But he loved everything Bob Moog made, and figured that there had to be someone, somewhere, who could wrangle something good out of it. And finally, there were the vocals. Nico wanted the sound of male and female voices singing together. Ideally, this meant finding a girl who could sing and play keyboards. Nico printed out flyers and started posting them all around Boston. The flyers listed influences and stated that this was for, quote, a band, not a project. It was sort of an inside joke. Up and down Massachusetts Avenue were flyers from Berkeley students. "Starting a metal funk project with prog roots, call Sean." It was always projects, never bands. To Nico, a project had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It had nothing to do with the lifelong commitment that was a band. That fall, Nico met Susan. She was smart, had an incredible voice, and was a classically trained pianist. Plus, she loved the Pixies. As soon as he could, Nico found the crew a rehearsing space in the Fenway. It flooded so much they actually used synthetic grass instead of carpet. For the next year, that was where they practiced. And eventually, Trocadero had their very first show at TT the Bear's Place in Cambridge on November 3rd, 1998.
With my games and your games and the rules.
In the coming months, the band recorded an EP at Q Division, working with John Lupfer. But ultimately, things didn't work out with Susan. She pursued Harvard and a family, and today she sings in a nationally recognized choir in California. Meanwhile, Wendy, who had actually been the first person to answer the "Are You Her" flyer, decided to move to Boston and reconnect with Nico. By the end of 1999, they were playing a couple of times a month, rehearsing 2 to 3 times a week, and writing new material. The music scene in Boston was incredibly supportive, and the band now had regular shows at venues around town, including TT the Bear's Place, Middle East, Linwood Grill, Lizard Lounge, and Kendall Cafe. The band recorded another EP at Fort Apache and Q Division, working again with the amazing John Lupfer. Wendy and Nico were both very passionate about the music, but they were starting to have differences. She agreed to help out as needed, but Trocadero wasn't going to be her main gig anymore. St. Barth's was the next destination for Trocadero. They briefly toured the small French island where Nico grew up, with Christine Wu filling in. A classical violinist, Christine brought a new sound to the band. This tour included a 3-hour set at a hotel where they mostly wanted covers, and a gig at Le Select, the best bar in the world, covered in stickers people had placed over the bar's 60-year history, and the inspiration for Jimmy Buffett's song, Cheeseburger in Paradise. After this tour, the band would become dormant for a few years. Nico was a huge fan of video game developer Bungie, and their new game Myth introduced him to the music of Martin O'Donnell and Michael Salvatore. Nico was strictly into analog gear, but this new sound drove him to purchase the Roland JD 990 that was used for the music in Myth. It was a digital synth with warm and beautiful strings, and once he had it, Nico began writing music with the instrument for Project Magma, a group of Myth fans who were creating new content for the game. This would not be the last time Bungie had a profound impact on Nico's musical career.
Hey,
Yeah?
you ever wonder why we're out here?
Well, that's one of the great mysteries of life, isn't it? Why are we here? What's it all about? Are we the product of some great cosmic coincidence? Or is there really a God who watches over everything we do and has a plan for each of us? I have to admit it keeps me awake some nights.
In May of 2003, Nico's buddy Jay suggested that he check out an online Halo series, a show called Red vs. Blue. After watching the first 15 seconds, he was hooked. The writing was genius, existentialist, absurdist comedy, and it was delivered with a punk rock DIY ethic. There was only one problem. The show had no music. So, Nico grabbed his Dan Electro guitar, recorded a few tracks, made an MP3 file, and sent it off to info@redversusblue.com. It wasn't long before Nico got an email back, saying they liked the music, and they wondered if they could get some more. This was the beginning of Trocadero and Red vs. Blue. Nico called up Wendy, and they started working together again. They tracked vocals, guitars, and keyboards at their respective apartments. They recorded the original version of Blood Gulch Blues that way, with Nico playing and recording drums at their rehearsal space when it wasn't flooded. The song Steady Ride was done in a matter of days due to deadlines. Matt Hullum asked for an upbeat song for the end credits of Season 2. One of Nico's favorite parts of Halo was driving the Warthog, so the song was going to be about that. But he had no idea how to start the lyrics. With the deadline hours away, Nico went to a bar in Cambridge and sat down at an outdoor terrace with a notepad and beer. It was a nice sunny day, and then eventually, a woman walked in wearing a small grayish-green dress. This is how the lines, gunmetal green, prettiest that I've seen, came to be. The rest of the lyrics came easily. Over the next year, Trocadero started working on tracks that would become the album Roses Are Red, Violets Are Blue. Meanwhile, Nico was working with the RVB folks and fast becoming friends. They finished the record with Wendy's work colleague, Jeff Williams. Jeff filled in for Wendy on keys after the record finished. Around that time, Nico also started working with Martha. She'd been in several bands, had a killer voice, and they connected musically. By then, however, Trocadero was mostly a studio entity compared to the earlier years. They played the occasional show, typically at Red vs. Blue events like RVBTO in Toronto, or at TT the Bear's Place when Rooster Teeth was in town for Anime Boston. Ghosts That Linger, the band's second album, was released in 2009. It had typical Trocadero songs like Colors, but also had songs like First Wave, which featured the JD990. From a marketing standpoint, this was probably a bad idea. Developing a band also means developing a brand. People who buy a bottle of Coke expect Coke, but Trocadero had been blessed with listeners who saw beyond these constructions. Nico moved to the West Coast that year, and later started working with a local professional musician named Violet Hart. A classically trained pianist, killer guitarist, and fearless singer, Violet helped shape the sound of their third record, Flying by Wire. While a lot has changed, some constants have remained. Nico still plays his beat-up Dan Electro baritone, the band still uses the Moog keyboard from that small music store, and they usually play song 617. In the 15 years between the day Nico put up those flyers and the night Trocadero played the RTX concert, the band has continued making music for Red vs. Blue, the longest-running web series in internet history. Their music has been heard all over the world, from venues like Lincoln Center in New York City to remote villages in developing countries, the testing sites of the Laptop for Every Child project. They've even had bits of music on the collector's editions of Halo 2 and Halo 3. And despite all of this, Trocadero is still relatively unknown. But that's okay. It's all a part of being in a band, not a project.